I would say Detective Pikachu is like the Fast and the Furious of our generation.
I can kind of see it.
I mean, honestly, like if you look at any of those movies, would you care about any of the characters or the plot?
No.
Do the people who really care about Fast and Furious care about that, or do they just care about the sweet ass cars
They just care about the cars and don't let
and
anybody tell
just
you differently.
and just the cool shit that the actors do with the cars,
Yeah.
or like the stuntsmen do with the cars?
In this one, it's about the Pokemon.
It's just about seeing all the Pokemon do cool shit.
Yeah.
Like,
that's really what we all wanted to go see. Welcome to the Slacking Off Show, the show that you're listening to when you should be doing something else. I'm your host, Nathan Wind, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. JP Gomez.
Hey, what's up?
So, what's your prior experience with Pokemon before going into this movie here?
My prior experience with Pokemon, oh god, it was a long time ago, but I think my experience with Pokemon was, I think it was right around the time when Pokemon became a big hit in the U.S. when everything just kind of came out all at once. You had the games, you had the anime, you had all the trading card stuff. I wasn't too into the trading card stuff, and I wasn't too into the games either because I didn't have a Game Boy at the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I did watch the anime quite a bit when I was younger.
Okay, yeah. No, I remember, I think I was like 5 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Game Boy Pocket, and I only had one game. And my parents told me that I apparently found a stuffed Pikachu at a store, really wanted it, and then found out they had a Pokemon Yellow version on store shelves, and I flipped out. So they bought me Pokemon Yellow version, and they have since claimed that was their biggest mistake because I have been a pretty big fan ever since.
I'm sure my parents feel the same way too.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we would never knew we were going to spend this much money.
Because as soon as they gave me a Game Boy, it was kind of over at that point. I was just like obsessed with getting like all the toys and that sort of thing. Just like going to, because I lived in New York at the time, they had the Pokemon Center.
Oh, I'm
you remember
so
that
jealous.
place?
I'm so jealous.
They had that place in Manhattan, so I was just like, trying to scrounge up as much change as I could to get to the subway ride there. And it was pretty fucking crazy back then, because keep in mind I was like little, and you saw these giant, like, was it Lapras plushies that were as big as I was, and I wanted to get one of those, but they cost like $200.
Oh my goodness!
I remember seeing an Entei one that was just like,
Yo,
that was big, but like imagine like a 5 or 6 year old being like, I don't know, 3 feet, and it was just like up to my shoulder levels back then.
to be young again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always wanted to go to the Pokemon centers in New York, but I never got the chance to before I think they closed it down.
And they remodeled it into just like a general Nintendo thing.
Yeah, which you can still go to today. It's pretty cool, but it's not as cool as a whole Pokemon Center.
No, I've been to like the Nintendo store a couple times afterwards, and I was just like, yeah, it's pretty neat to see like all the Mario type stuff, but like it doesn't seem quite as dedicated, because like, okay, like they have a bunch of like Nintendo themed paraphernalia and stuff like that, because they have like statues of like Donkey Kong and that sort of thing, and that stuff is cool. It just didn't seem as focused as being an entire store of Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, it's still
cool,
but it's just, I don't know. I feel like it would have been, especially now that there's Pokemon stuff everywhere. I mean, we got Mewtwo mugs, we got some Amiibo, we got plush. There's Pokemon stuff literally everywhere right now. I think a whole dedicated store would be really neat to visit.
I mean, there are, just not in the U.S.
Oh, that's right. Don't they have some in Japan, I think?
They have at least 8 of them in Japan.
Yeah, at least 8.
And then one in like Singapore and South Korea. So it's big enough there that they feel like they have a good enough profit to keep those businesses open.
I guess.
I guess so. Yeah.
With all these plushies and new merch and movies, with Pokemon the first movie coming back out later this year, there's a lot of hype.
Did you see that in theaters?
Back in the day, yeah, I saw the original Pokemon the first movie in theaters, but I never got this trading card. Everybody walked out with like this Mewtwo card from the movies.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And
but it's
I
like a
never got
special
it.
Mew card that was like hieroglyphs and stuff.
I think that was from 2000. But there was
I
like
think
a
it was
Mewtwo
1999.
card I think they gave out. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No,
Ladies and gentlemen,
it
let
was
us know in the comments.
It was definitely a mute card. I
It was?
remember. It was like cool to look at, but it was kind of at the same time worthless because you can't read anything. Like there was no English in it. It's just like made up symbols and stuff. So it was just like
I feel like we have one somewhere in this house.
you
haven't put it through the
you might
washing
have kept
machine.
one either here or maybe in like your parents' place or something like that.
Maybe it's worth something. We could sell it.
We'll see.
Yeah, right. But anyways, so you know we've got a long history with the franchise. We
Mhm.
still play the games regularly today.
Yeah, we still keep up.
Yeah, I mean I've kind of drifted off a little bit more just with the last gen Sun and Moon is kind of where I wasn't as hardcore as I used to be. But we used to
Mhm.
play competitively, and we've enjoyed the franchise for a long time. So that's why this movie was such a surprise to find that they went the way they did with this movie. They adapted a video game for the 3DS into a whole movie.
Mhm.
Like, did you play the game? I personally didn't. I kind of want to, but I kind of am afraid.
Like I've heard about this game for a while now, but it just kind of came and went, to my knowledge.
Mhm.
I think part of it is because it was on the 3DS at a time when the Switch was, you know, taking off.
Yeah, I
So
think it
most
did come
people-
out shortly after the Switch did.
So most people just kind of forgot about it.
Not to mention, like $40 for a Detective Pikachu game is kind of like, I don't know if I would spend my $40 on a Pokemon spinoff like that.
Not really.
It must have done well enough to make it a movie out of it. Either that, or they just felt that confident about the story.
I guess they were.
Well, they did a tech demo a couple of years back for the Detective Pikachu video game where they motion capped actors and they put it onto Pikachu. And they showed this like demo test footage somewhere at some conference in Japan. It was weird. It was really creepy. I'm sure you can still find it somewhere on YouTube, but that did not inspire hope when I had heard that they were going to have Pikachu talk in a game.
Nah.
But oh well, it is what it is. So we don't really know if this follows the story of the video game or not. Kind of hope it does. It's not a terrible tale if it does follow that story. But what did you think of these character designs? Pokemon's traditionally this very Japanese animated style, cartoonish flavor, and we were treated to some very cool, realistic designs in this movie. I think some of them were hit or miss.
You thought some of them were hit and miss.
Yeah, I think some of them were
Which ones did you think were miss?
Apom, especially.
Mm.
I thought that was really. I mean, Apom's like this purple monkey thing with a extra hand on its tail. I think it's already kind of creepy, but seeing it in like real life, with fur and these abstract monkey-like proportions, I don't know. I think it was kind of faithful to the original character, but it looked a little too creepy and not weird enough.
I think it's the face more than anything.
Yes, that's a great way of narrowing it down. That definitely kind of weirded me out a little
Like
bit.
that thing is always going to be a hard sell, just period. Because like if you look at the actual, like what it's supposed to look like, I'll probably like throw it up or something. It has this like smile and has these big eyes. That it's like, okay, it looks cute enough in like just 2D animated form, but like converting it to 3D where it's supposed to have depth and texture, like it's supposed to have actual skin or something. That's the part that made people concerned about just this whole idea in general, like the idea of adapting these abstract things into things that are supposed to have or at least resemble having some sort of skin or have some sort of organs. Like, oh, the eyes are actually like eyeballs. Like, oh, okay, that's a weird like uncanny valley thing. But I think for the most part, they actually did a good job with that.
In the opening scenes where they're just kind of showing the establishing shots of the world and how Pokemon live in it, I was just like, God, why isn't this my life? Like, why can't I live there? I wanted to be there, like it was almost like a dream come true just seeing those first few scenes, knowing I grew up wanting to do this.
Right. and I wouldn't say it's like the opening scene though, because you had that previous scene beforehand where it's more like a regular kind of like suburban type of place. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
Where it was
yeah.
establishing uh, just kind of how Pokemon works in general for like a brief moment, like the whole throwing the ball to catch a Pokemon
Oh yeah,
type of
yeah.
thing.
I remember that now. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just at least the general intro kind of gave me
yeah.
that vibe.
The movie starts out like you said with Tim and his friend uh, persuading him to catch a Pokemon, to catch his Cubone, and it just didn't work out very well, which it validates like his whole opinion at the beginning that he doesn't really like being a Pokemon trainer, or he doesn't seem to like Pokemon in general. And yeah, I thought that was very interesting that they established that sort of thing. I guess to sort of show or to set up this whole buddy cop comedy that they were playing later in the movie.
Yeah, and I definitely got that vibe, and I wish we had found out a little more about why he is that way. You know,
I
because
f-
I'm
I
sitting
feel
here
like
and I'm like, I would kill to be in your world right now.
I feel like the flashback scenes are supposed to imply that's why he hates Pokemon, but I don't know if I couldn't quite catch like the reason um the reasoning why. I don't know if they explained it.
I don't think they ever did. The main thing that kind of like motivates him to get out of his comfort zone is when I think it was in the newspaper, right? That he reads that.
No, he got a call from the police.
It was, yeah, that's right. It was a call from the police that his dad had been killed in an accident. But the moment he gets off the train,
Mm-hmm.
that's when we're really treated to like a visual spectacle.
The moment when he gets into Rhyme City.
Yeah, when he gets off the train in Rhyme City,
Mm-hmm.
and they just show all these establishing shots of a city where people and Pokemon live together. There's no battling. There's no training. They're treated almost as equals,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just Pokemon everywhere.
Up the wazoo.
Yeah, like it's ridiculous. I was just sitting there like drooling. I was like, "Whoa,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this is ridiculous." You see some of them doing, like jobs that benefit society, like Machamp directing traffic.
Yeah, like that was definitely one of the points of the movie where I thought that it was starting to go to places.
Mhm.
Well, it literally went to places, but I thought it was like in terms of the quality of the movie, I thought it was actually like getting to. It started looking promising, I guess you could say, because not only do you see these Pokemon in live action, but you actually get to see them doing things. Like it's not just they're over in the corner and it's doing things independently of anything else. Like they just superimpose the CGI character onto a shot. Like you actually see them doing things.
Yeah,
Like
they're
they're
integrated so well.
they're the center of some of these shots sometimes, and so you can see them actually, like you said, doing things that seems kind of natural. You have the Snorlax sleeping in the middle of the train, and then Machop, or not train, in the middle of the street, and then Machamp tried to direct traffic.
Which is really funny because he's got 4 arms.
Yeah,
And I was like, man, props to the person who looked at him and was like, you know what? Machamp would be the best at directing 4-way stops because he could just go like, nope, yep, go. Like,
mm-hmm. Yeah, he would just like use all 4 of his hands to like stop this 4-way traffic, but then have the one hand go like this.
yeah, I was like, oh, that's genius. And it was funny. I laughed out loud
Mm-hmm.
at that part because it took me by surprise.
Yeah, and then you had like all these like I saw a Trico just kind of like clinging onto the walls. It's like, yeah, that makes sense because he's a gecko for all intents and purposes. And it's like, okay, that's really good. But one of the things that I thought was really good about that moment was that it kind of demonstrated that the directors and the writers actually cared about Pokemon.
This is a good point. Yeah.
Because usually when most people talk about Pokemon, it's usually the first 150.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured when they were going to do a Pokemon adaptation, it's going to be mostly just the first 150. And because, people are going to like it because it was their childhood,
Mm-hmm.
or people thought, well, it's the most marketable aspect,
Yeah.
or the most marketable Pokemon. But like the director and the writer actually seem to care about Pokemon in general, to the point where they figured they'll just take the Pokemon that actually makes the most sense rather than just kind of like fitting the first 150 into some context that doesn't really make sense.
I'm really glad they did that
Mhm.
too because, I didn't really realize it until you pointed it out just then. But you're right. That was kind of the moment where I think in my head too, it clicked, and I was like, oh, you people like really cared.
Mm-hmm.
Like you took
Like
the
you
time.
liked Pokemon. You didn't like your childhood involving Pokemon. You
Yeah,
liked Pokemon.
you like it, and you're gonna treat it well.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike some other movies involving animals that have had trailers come out lately.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to really respect and like the source material.
Mm-hmm.
And it really showed with that.
Like there was a brief shot where you see a bunch of Loudred making noise, and I think if it was dictated by someone who didn't actually care about Pokemon that much, they would just try to cram some other Pokemon in there where it wouldn't fit. But like, if you're gonna use a scene that's supposed to imply sound, why not go with the one Pokemon that makes sound, whose entire thing is all about making sound?
Yeah, use them as a boombox.
Yeah, like, it makes so much sense, and that's what
really
made
does.
it work so well.
And it's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's everywhere in the movie.
yeah.
And it does put a smile on my face
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how well and how much they integrated things.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the coffee sign outside of the coffee shop that shows up later, it's a knock towel that just says like
Mm-hmm.
coffee right here.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like they choose the right Pokemon for their job,
Yeah.
essentially.
They really did. So they end up somehow getting into this like underground arena because
Mhm.
Pokemon battles are apparently outlawed in the city because
They're
they're supposed to be
prohibited, right.
living with the Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And like of course the guy who owns the place is the one who has the information,
Mm-hmm.
and he's chilling with the Charizard,
Mm-hmm.
and he looks at the guy and his Charizard look at this Pikachu, and he's like, oh
I need to get revenge on you.
yeah, you hurt my Charizard last time, blah 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 blah. And he's just going off on them. We need to have a rematch, and Pikachu's just like all about it.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. He jumps in this. They do a cage match.
Mm-hmm.
Jumps in this cage match, only to find out he can't use his electrical attacks.
Still can't use it.
What was he thinking?
It's very interesting to see that entire scene because I felt like that was more of a callback to the games more than anything else.
That Pikachu would have a type advantage.
No, just the
against?
whole battling thing.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah.
you had because the whole scene started with was it Blastoise battling Gengar. Yeah, and they had the whole thing where he used Shadow Ball and they used Double Team, and then Blastoise did like I don't know, like Hydro Pump type of thing.
He like spun around his shell and just was like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, essentially. And that's supposed to be like, okay, what if Pokemon battling was in real life? It's that sort of fan servicey type of thing.
It was cool, but it was just so short. At least that initial battle
Mm-hmm.
was so short.
I thought at that okay, so like the movie was like really good at that point, or at least I
Mhm.
thought it was pretty good because you had Ryan Reynolds just kind of like making quips at everything.
And he's funny.
You know, he's pretty good at it, which is surprising because most of these people, because not most of these people, most everyone just kind of had hesitations towards him playing as Pikachu, as
Mhm.
like this wisecracking Pikachu, but it worked out pretty well to just kind of like make fun of all these things happening, like all these crazy things happening, like the guy who had a Charizard didn't have a shirt on for some reason.
And he has a cool Charizard tattoo on him though.
Okay, yeah.
I did notice that. I was
But
like, ooh.
but Pikachu's like, why aren't you wearing a shirt?
Yeah, he's making all these dumb quips throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's like appropriate Deadpool quips.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Deadpool
age appropriate Deadpool quips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his whole characteristic about him being addicted to coffee, and then pointing out the whole like sort of love interest between Tim and Lucy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He does just kind of like start teasing. He's like, "Yo, so you go into her office?"
Mm-hmm.
And like you see these expressions on Pikachu and whatnot. Some surprisingly adult jokes
Mm-hmm.
that are implied there, especially for like a Pokemon Nintendo movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say at this point, I was like kind of like you. I was really into the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is kind of where they started to lose me.
See, that's what I was about to say, because at this point I was having a pretty good time seeing all these Pokemon do things that are very Pokemon things, but they're Pokemon things that make sense a lot of the time, or at least to me they did.
Mm-hmm.
But then at that point in the movie, after the whole underground ring scene, is when the movies was like, oh yeah, we have an actual plot.
We need to get back to that.
We need to get back to that because it's sort of that plot sort of took a back seat to that sort of thing, like during the whole during the scene prior, and that's something that I've noticed about this movie is that it kind of establishes sort of certain plot points, and then just says that it's kind of important, and then at certain points it just kind of like pushes all these things to the side, and just be like, hey, check out this cool Pokemon thing.
Yeah,
You know,
and it's
like-
almost like at this point the whole finding your father plot is backseated to this other subplot.
The whole finding your father plot and like Tim's character development, like I was saying before, that kind of took a backseat in when Pikachu came into the picture, and just the big plot in general took a backseat when the whole fighting thing, the whole Pokemon battling thing came into the picture. So when they started getting into a plot, that's when I started to notice the movie didn't seem so good. Not only that, because like I don't want to nitpick. I'm trying not to nitpick at that sort of thing, but I can't help it because you at one point you just see Pokemon everywhere.
Literally.
They're all over every shot of the movie. And then afterwards they dialed that back. Because as soon as the plot starts to kick in, you don't see as many Pokemon. You see maybe one of them or two of them in the shot, and it's mostly Pikachu.
And I would say that's probably due to budget restraints, as I'm sure you and I have concluded.
Oh, yeah.
But the ones that we did get, like the shots kind of going forward, I would say they were really detailed, though. They didn't include as many. There were a couple of exceptions, but they looked really cool. But I do agree with you. Man, I really wish we had seen a lot more, because I don't even think we even see that many different kinds of Pokemon at this point.
I mean,
like species.
I mean, at a certain point, that's when you start to see different Pokemon coming into the picture, because it's like a lot beforehand was a lot of Aipom, Charizards, and like Trico and that sort of thing. That's when you start to see, I guess, supporting characters like Greninja and Torterra coming into the picture. But they didn't come in until later on. I'm talking about like how even those elements don't seem as important as the plot at that point. Whereas in the first half of the movie, it was kind of the other way around.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's almost like they were just like, oh yeah, that's right. This
oh
is
yeah,
a
by the way,
licensed
this is a movie. We need to actually like get to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we have a story to tell that people paid for. When really we probably just paid for it to see what everything looked like in live action.
Yeah, and I think they kind of knew that going into it, but I think it didn't really work for like the overall movie.
Yeah, no.
Because when you get to, like, I guess you could say the second act, when they go into the lab, and
that's
get chased by the Greninja, that was a pretty decent like PG horror themed kind of sequence. Because you had the Greninja like slowly coming out, and then you have like the whole scene where it's like goop coming out from the floor, and then you pan up. Usually in most horror movies it's like blood or something like that, but it's like saliva coming from a Greninja's tongue,
which is kind of funny, kind of a neat detail.
It was a pretty effective horror movie kind of sequence. The whole point of the main villain, who is what's it? I don't want to say it's Harry because that's the name of
I think it was like
the
Clifford.
dad. I think it was like Henry Clifford or something like that. Anyway, because the whole motivation of that character, he established that his idea was to, I guess in his own words, evolve people into something better. Howard Clifford. Okay. And like he established his motivation at that point.
His son's name was Roger Clifford.
Okay. So Howard Clifford, he established that his motivations were to evolve people into something beyond. And I noticed that was mostly motivated by the fact that he was in a wheelchair. So he was disabled, and so he probably just thought that he probably just felt insecure and felt like he needed to push this sort of thing. So trying to get these like Pokemon to become more aggressive and to become giant kind of felt like irrelevant to that sort of point.
It really did, and I think they sort of established at one point, because they had Mewtwo in captivity, and they said that they got the chemical from Mewtwo's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene that we thought was like a homage to Pokemon the first movie, the origin of Mewtwo,
Mm-hmm.
was actually just a scene where they captured him somehow,
Yeah.
and
somehow.
they just extracted it from his DNA and made the chemical from there. And apparently, it just did all these weird things.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, Mewtwo's DNA can do everything from make things aggressive to grow exponentially bigger. We don't. It's not really established.
I guess that's supposed to be. I guess that's supposed to be the effects of the chemical.
Something like that.
But like, here's the thing about the villain's motivations is that it was actually not that at all, because we learned later on, it was just him trying to get into the mind of Mewtwo,
Which,
and then him trying to subsequently turn people into Pokemon using the chemical.
and he called it Ascension.
And that's when the third act comes in. Mm-hmm.
This is a weird act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is definitely where the movie kind of started losing me.
This is where, okay, so like, I guess if you want to call the second act where they kind of stumbled a bit, third act is where they start to trip and fall.
Oh, yeah. And eventually, faceplant.
They went to Clifford's, I guess, office.
That's right, because he was supposed... Howard
That's where he puts on
Clifford-
the freaking... Oh, yeah, because Tim went to Clifford, or Howard Clifford, to tell him about what just happened, that Roger took it. But then he revealed himself to be the bad guy, and then he synced up with Mewtwo's brain.
Clever foreshadowing just with his office, with behind his desk, with
right.
the god Pokemon dialogue on the left.
Yeah. Because that's also one of those things where it's like, if you don't know about Pokemon all that well, it will just completely be lost on people. Like the fact that he has these 3 god Pokemon behind him. It's
With like Arceus, the actual god of Pokemon, literally behind his desk.
I don't know how non-Pokemon fans would react to that, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, where is this going?
Yeah, I was like, you're clearly not good.
Yeah, you're definitely not good. Up until that point, Howard Clifford's motivation is to just kind of like get over this whole insecurity about the fact that he's a disabled human and that I love Pokemon so much. I thought that his whole inspiration was for him to be a Pokemon himself. The idea of trying to assert that sort of thing onto everyone else, trying to insist that
It was random.
It was pretty random, trying to insist that everyone also wanted to be Pokemon just like he was.
Well, it was also stupid because
It's also
he
stupid.
took over Mewtwo. Yeah, you're gonna be in good shape if you're getting put into Mewtwo.
And
everybody else is like fucking Psyducks and Magikarps.
right, like being a Pokemon is not all that cracked up to be when you
Yeah,
think
like
about
I
it.
wouldn't mind being a Machamp.
Yeah, but like, imagine being a Psyduck though. Would you go through that? Just having headaches constantly and having to control that. Would you actually go through that?
No,
No.
I don't. I know what I want to.
Not to like the movie establishes that Pokemon are pretty cool, but they also have some shit that they have to deal with themselves. Like, okay, there was a brief moment where Pikachu had told to Tim that he wanted to climb onto his back. Because it's a reference to Ash with his Pikachu, but also because he explained that it's kind of tiring to be on foot all the time. Because I'm this small rat.
Yeah, he's got little legs there.
He's got little legs, as you can see here. So it's really inconvenient. So it's like, I'm not sure if the trade-off is really worth it, personally.
Not at all. Like,
no.
God. And, somebody out there got swapped out with Magikarp.
Yeah, somebody. Maybe the guy
sucks.
who owned that one Magikarp. Although it evolved into a Gyarados.
Yeah,
anyway,
but somebody else did it.
Somebody else. So I thought it was like really stupid. If they had kept it to just him wanting to merge with Mewtwo,
Yeah, that would have made more sense.
that would have been okay.
Or even Ditto.
Or with Ditto, that would have been okay. If he even just wanted to have Mewtwo merge him with a more physically capable Pokemon, if he thought he had to force Mewtwo to do that sort of thing or persuade Mewtwo, that would have been okay. But I think they took a step too far just to kind of force this sort of big, high stakes drama type of thing.
Yeah, and it was to set up this kind of weird Pokemon battle between Detective Pikachu and Mewtwo, which is the most unfair matchup.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Because he barely even he could barely handle a Charizard.
yeah, and now you're being faced up against
One of the
Mewtwo.
strongest Pokemon ever,
Like,
as the
the
movie established.
factually, and or at least in the games in terms of stats, the
Mhm.
strongest Pokemon.
Mhm.
Like, you're gonna have a hard time here, little guy.
You know
Like-
what I thought was funny though? I just realized something. Pikachu and Mewtwo were battling on a bunch of parade floats.
Oh,
Just
my
like
gosh.
Super Smash Brothers.
Oh my gosh, the Pokeflutes.
I don't know if they
snap.
I don't know if they intended that to be a reference to that, but
Oh, that's clever if it was.
mhm.
If it was,
Mhm.
Pokefloats for
See,
Smash Ultimate.
that was my whole thing about man. That was my whole thing about the second half of the movie. It has a lot of references and callbacks that I personally enjoyed. The problem is that they're supporting something that is not very good.
No, not at all. Would you recommend people go see it in theaters or buy it on?
I can't say that it's bad because I think what it does good is pretty good. It realizes this whole scenario of what if Pokemon actually exist,
Mhm.
and it does it in a very convincing way. So I can't say that it's a bad movie. However, you just kind of got how do I even say this? You just kind of have to go into it with the fact that at a certain point, this movie just kind of forgets how to be a movie,
Yeah.
and then when it reminds itself that it's a movie, that's when it becomes worse. So I say, if anything, go into it just kind of for the Pokemon, if nothing else.
Yeah, if you just want to see that, it's cool.
Characters are not interesting, story's not good, so I would say, if nothing else, just go see it for the Pokemon.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like go out to theaters for it. Don't spend like $14. Matinee this. Maybe wait for Netflix. That sort of thing. I still say it's worth a watch.
I think it's. I would say if you're like a big Pokemon fan, I think you should go watch it because it's not terrible.
No.
And what it does right, it does really right. I think I think it's good enough where if you're a Pokemon fan, you can just have a good time, and I kind of hope it makes enough money and gets relatively decent enough reviews to see them take the franchise into other different directions. Experiment with it a bit more because this was such a surprising take.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I got to be fair as a critic. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you go see it in theaters, I think you'll have fun. I don't think this is one that you should like rush out to go see immediately. Final verdict. Yeah, it's a good time. Go watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe hold off on buying that Blu-ray until you've seen it. Matinee price this for sure.
Would you buy the Steelbook?
Maybe.
Okay.
It's a maybe. I'll have to simmer on that.
When I come around in a couple months, probably like September, when they're going to start doing home video release, I expect to see them.
It might be
somewhere in this place.
somewhere in this house.
I'm going to look for it.